Speaker.
Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure and an honour to rise in wholehearted support for the second reading of the Residential Tenancy Amendment Bill. Can I first start my call tonight, Mr. Speaker, by just acknowledging our Housing Minister, the Honourable Dr Nick Smith, for all his work he does in the space and the very credible work he does. And I think he's brought a very credible bill to this House. I'd also like to acknowledge Alfred Naro, who was the chairperson of the Social Services Select Committee that steered this bill through to this stage. I think it's fair to say it was lively discussion around the Select Committee table, and I think the slight and deft hand of Alfred Naro was able to administer this bill clearly to its second reading. I'd also like to acknowledge the 715 submitters who took time to submit to this bill. We heard from 110 orally, and I must say, out of all the bills that I've sat on as a member of a select committee, Mr. Speaker, we had a very wide range of views and stakeholder groups, from landlords, from tenants, low-income advocacy groups, from building interests around sustainability and environmental practices. So I'd just like to acknowledge all their time that they were heard and has been input into this bill. But most of all, I'd like to acknowledge the advisors and the officials, because there's a lot of technicality about this bill. There's a lot of fact and data that we need to be informed by. This bill has become very emotive, and quite rightly, let's be clear, one person that is injured or there's a fatality from fire is one person too many. And one person who rents a damp, cold house is definitely one person too many, Mr. Speaker. But what we need to do, and I think the advisors and officials helped us through this, is coming back and looking objectively to the facts and looking at evidence-based policy and evidence-based legislation that will make a positive impact on low-income renters. Because what we know currently is that there's no requirement under the 1986 Residential Tenancy Act for insulation or smoke alarms, Mr. Speaker. So it's quite right we put this in. When we look at about 270,000 private rentals that need insulation, 56% or 150,000 of them low-income earners renting, and about 120,000 need smoke alarms. So when you look at that, a much-needed bill, base that on the history that this government has around retrofitting, spending hundreds of millions of dollars into rental properties already. There's some great work of organisations, My Electorate, Community Energy Action, teaming up with Canterbury District Health Board, working with rental property tenants who are presenting to A&E around respiratory illness and so forth. And we know this method works of insulating houses and making people safer. So the logical step now is to draw the next step, and that's around regulation, Mr. Speaker. And that's exactly what this bill will do. It will enact from the 1st of July 2016 that all social housing, income-related rents will be insulated, and private rentals by the 1st of July 2019. There was some question about why 3 years, but when we heard from the sector around scaling up to provide insulation for about 180,000, about 60,000 houses a year, that fitted very much the capacity of the insulation sector. I just want to focus as well around the safety alarms, because that's when we need to look at the facts, just acknowledging the very hard-working volunteer firemen and women in my electorate, Mr. Speaker, who tirelessly out there advocating for free fire alarms and getting them into people's houses. What we know with 120,000 houses, we have about one fire per every 400 houses, about 20 fatalities. Out of those 120,000 houses, by regulating for smoke alarms, that will save 3 lives every year, the potential of 3 lives every year, Mr. Speaker. So it's great to see that will be brought in by the 1st of July 2016. A couple of amendments that this bill has been brought back with. One, Mr. Speaker, was around increasing the penalty for unlawful acts. A lot of submitters, and quite rightly, thought there was a power imbalance between tenants and landlords, and asking for this requirements around insulation and smoke alarms. We felt that by increasing the penalty from $3,000 to $4,000 was an effective tool in readdressing that balance as well, Mr. Speaker. We also realised upon further exploration of this bill there was a further amendment needed. Currently, landlords need to give 24 hours notice to come in and repair and provide maintenance. Under this amended bill now, Mr. Speaker, landlords will be able to come in within 24 hours notice and fit smoke alarms as well. Very much wholeheartedly support this bill and commend it to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cool.